Hello and welcome to this new video on Spring Boot, where we are going to learn why Spring Data JPA is a game changer in the Spring Boot ecosystem. By the end of this video, you will learn how to perform CRUD operations on a table named profile that will have columns like profile ID, name, TOB, and phone. Then map the Java class to the profile table using simple JPA annotations. Then you will understand how Spring Boot do the magic behind the scene, implementing the interface you extend from JPA repository, which is actually the game changer for the developers. You will see how to insert, retrieve, delete, and update records effortlessly. So stay till the end and let's dive in. I'm Kishore. Let's get started. Let us first try to understand why Spring Data JPA is actually called as a game changer in Spring Boot ecosystem. The reason is it makes developers' life easy by providing automatic database connections and CRUD methods for the tables. You don't have to write even a single logic to implement the CRUD operations. Who is going to implement these operations? There is a library called Spring Boot Starter Data JPA which will handle this behind the scene. Let us see how to use this Spring Boot Starter Data JPA in our project. Firstly, you have to visit this start.spring.io website to create a Spring Boot project. Choose Maven as the project. Then the Spring Boot version I'm choosing is 3.4.2. Just name the project metadata where group ID is going to be com.example. We will create the artifact ID with the name called Spring Demo DB. Then we will choose Java version as 21. We need to add few dependencies. As I'm going to use MySQL database, I need to add MySQL library also. Firstly, I will add web library to have the Tomcat in my project. Then we will add a data JPA library, which is going to handle all the CRUD operations as well as database connections. Then we will add the dev tools and lastly, MySQL driver. We will generate, which is going to download the project. Next, we need to open that downloaded project from Eclipse. Go to File and select Open Projects from File System. There you select Archive because the downloaded project will be in zip format. Eclipse will automatically extract the project for you. You have to just uncheck the first folder and keep the folder that is having Maven selected. Hit finish and wait for the libraries to download. Once the project is downloaded, you can go for application.properties file where you are going to mention the database credentials. Now the question is why we need to mention the database credentials here is Spring Boot will automatically establish the connection. Let us enter database credentials, that is username, password, driver class name and the URL. Firstly, we will enter the driver class name, that is going to be data source dot driver class name. As I am using MySQL database, the database driver name is com.mysql.cj.jdbc.driver. The next property should be the URL of the database, that is going to be jdbc colon mysql colon double slash localhost 3306, which is the default port number and the mydb. Then we need to enter username and password. In my machine, the database username and password both are root. Let me provide the username and the password. That is data source.password equals to root. Next, we will create this database, that is mydb, in the MySQL. Let me open MySQL command line client. There, I will create a database called mydb and we will use this MyDB database. What we are going to do is we are going to create a table where we are going to do the CRUD operation. The table name is profile and we will have profile ID, name, date of birth, phone number. So profile ID, I will make it as primary key and also I will use auto increment option. Then name, date of birth and lastly the phone number. We will auto increment the ID using this auto increment that is going to start from 1 to 3. So table is created. So what is the next thing we should do is we need to create an entity class. Now what is an entity class? As we have the profile table, in order to perform CRUD operations on the table, we have to create one class with @entity annotation, which makes Spring Data JPA to directly map the object of this class to this table. We have to provide table informations on this class. By using @table, we can mention what is the table name, and there are four columns in the profile table, so we need to create four properties. Each property maps to the particular column. We can use @column in case the column names and property names are different. That is why there is an @column name equals to profile ID. As it is an auto increment value, we are using this generated value annotation, and @ID says that this profile ID is a primary key so that Spring Data JPA can generate the queries based on the primary key to perform update operation, delete operation, or retrieve operation. There are other properties like name, date of birth, and phone number. As their names are same as the column names, we are not using @column annotation. So let's create this profile class in our project. To create the profile class, go to src main/java folder and create a class with the name called profile. Hit finish. We will use @entity annotation imported from jakarta.persistence package. All the annotations are part of this jakarta.persistence package. And we can mention the table name, that is profile. Since there are four columns, I am writing four properties. Let me generate setters and getters. And finally, we will annotate these properties so that it is going to map to the table. But when their names are same, we don't have to use any @column annotation. We need to use annotation on profile ID like @ID to specify it is a primary key. Then we need to use generated value, which is going to automatically generate the primary key by using strategy generator type identity. And remember, when you use @ID, it has to be imported from the same jakarta.persistence package. The reason is when you use control space, you can observe there is a org.spring framework package that also provides @ID. So don't be confused when you use @ID, make sure that you are importing the right one. I need to use @column on this property called profile ID to mention it has to map to the profile underscore ID column because this property and the column name it is mapping is different. Since Spring Data JPA provides CRUD methods to perform the database operations on the table, it is going to provide one interface called JPA repository which we need to extend. So let's see what is that. There is an interface called a JPA repository with CRUD methods which are not implemented that is going to take two arguments T and ID. The T is going to be the entity class and ID is going to be the primary key type. What we have to do is we have to just extend the JPA repository interface with our own interface. So what happens when you do this? It is going to inherit all the methods of JPA repository to profile repository like this, where the save method of generic type is going to be of profile. Find all method is going to return list of profiles. Delete by ID is going to take integer as a parameter. Then find by ID is going to take integer as a parameter and returns optional profile. Next, Spring Boot is going to automatically implement this profile repository interface, something like this, where it is going to perform all these operations on the profile table based on the table informations you have in the entity class. And then Spring Boot is automatically going to create the object in the Spring container, which is actually profile repository implementation object. And what you have to do is in your class, you have to just auto wire the profile repository. This object is going to be injected to this variable so that whatever the methods you call from this profile DAO reference, it will be called on profile repository implementation object. So what is the next thing you have to do is you have to call all the CRUD methods present in that implementation object. Suppose you create a profile object with some name, phone number, and date of birth. When you invoke the save method using profile DAO reference, the Spring Boot is going to invoke the save method on this profile repository implementation object. So it is going to map that object to this profile table by automatically generating the profile ID. It is going to look for the table metadata from the entity class and maps the properties to the name, DOB, and phone number. So let us try to create this profile repository interface first and auto wire in the service class. We will create profile repository interface. Let me create an interface with the name profile repository. Click on finish. We have to inherit JPA repository like this, JPA repository, and mention the entity class name, that is profile, and then the data type of the primary key, that is integer. You don't have to write any methods because all the methods of JPA repository will be inherited to profile repository. This is the only thing you have to do because Spring Boot will automatically implement this interface and create the object of that interface implementation and registers the object in the Spring container. What we have to do is we have to just create a class which is going to be a service layer. Let me name it as profile service IMPL, and I will write @service so that Spring will take care of creating this object, and we will auto wire the DAO layer, that is profile repository, and we will name it as profile DAO. We will use this annotation, and we have to perform CRUD operation by invoking the methods present in this profile repository interface. For that, let me create a method called create profile that is going to return profile as the return type, and the create profile is going to take profile as a parameter. Now the question is, why create profile returns profile? Because create profile is going to invoke the save method, and save method is going to save the profile object which you are passing as a parameter, and it is going to return the saved entity. You have to just call the profile DAO save method like this. Now the profile object will be supplied to the save, and it is going to invoke the save method on that auto implemented object, and save happens on the profile table. Then we will create a method that is going to return all the profile, that is going to be get profiles, and we will say return profile DAO dot find all method. We will also delete the profile by using a method called delete profile, which returns void delete profile. Let it take an ID as a parameter, and you have to just call the method called delete by ID. Finally, we will create a method that is going to return a profile based on the ID. We will call that method name as get profile, which takes a primary key, and we need to call the method of profile repository, that is find by ID. Let us pass the parameter ID, and remember the find by ID returns optional. For that reason, we need to create optional variable which is going to have profile, and this optional has lot of methods. In that, I will use the method called or else by passing null. What this will do is it is going to return the profile object if it is found, else it returns null. Finally, what we have to do is we have to use this object and call all these methods, which is internally performing CRUD operation on the profile table. But we have to do this in the main method, because in the main method we would not be using auto void statement. We can get this object from the Spring container using the getBean method, and whose ID is going to be the same as the class name, except this uppercase P will be in lowercase p. Let us go to the main method, which is Spring Demo DB application. Since this Spring application.run returns application context, what we can do is we can use application context variable. Make sure that you are importing from the right package, that is org.springframework.context. Then we will get that bean. To do that, we will call the getBean method. And what is the bean ID? Bean ID is actually the class name. So first let me write here profile service impl equals context.getBean, where it has to downcast to profile service impl. And the bean ID is going to be the class name with lowercase p, that is our first letter. Now we can call all the methods of profile service impl. So what I will do is first I will call the create profile and get profiles method. Firstly, I will create the profile object. Profile equals new profile, and we will set the name, that is Athar. Then we will set the date of birth by passing the local date. And lastly, we will pass the phone number. We are not passing ID because it is auto-generated. We will call this method called create profile from the service. And remember, it returns a profile. So I will use a profile type variable telling that created profile equals. And let us try to print profile created with an ID, that is created profile dot get profile ID. If it successfully stores, I should be able to get the profile ID. Let me run this program. Observe there is a statement which is printing, that is profile created with an ID 123. Let us try to store another record and see what it prints again. Siddharth, and then some date of birth. As the program automatically reloads because of DevTools, you should be able to see profile created with an ID 124. We will comment this create profile method and try to get all the profiles by using get profiles. I will just comment this, and then I will use this service.getProfiles method, and it returns list. So I will use list profile, and we will import the list from util package. We should able to iterate this profile using the for loop. Let me use the for loop. So profile p colon list, and we will print the ID, that is p dot get ID, then the name, that is p dot get name, and then the date of birth, that is p dot get DOB, and lastly we will also print phone number. I have given the same phone number for both the profiles, but other informations you can see different. Get phone number, and the moment I save, it automatically reloads and shows you the output. What we will also try is we will try to get a profile based on the ID. I will comment this. To get the profile, we need to call the method called service.getProfile by passing the ID. I need to pass either 123 or 124 because those are the two IDs. Let me pass 123. Then, but what getProfile returns is it is returning the optional .rls. It could be either null or it could be the profile object. For that reason, I will write if profile is not equal to null, it should be able to print the profile information. That is id equals profile dot get profile id. Then let me print only name, that is profile dot get name. Else we will print an error message telling that profile not found. Let's run this program and see what happens. Notice you could able to see the profile information. Let me pass 1 to 4. I should be able to get the name Siddharth. Wait for the refresh. You can see Siddharth. But 1 to 5 is not there. It should show the error message as the else condition will be executed, telling that profile not found. What you also can do is you can create one variable here, id equals to 1, 2, 3, and you pass that id here. And here you can mention profile not found with an id, that is this id, so that it will be more flexible to display the error message. Now, if I pass 1 to 5, it should display profile not found with an ID 1 to 5. Lastly, we will try to call the delete profile based on ID. Firstly, let me pass this ID 1 to 4, which should show the profile information, that is 1 to 4 and the name Siddharth. But the moment I delete this profile using the ID 1 to 4, then it should display 1 to 4 profile not found. For that, I will call the service.delete profile method by passing the ID, and the moment I save, I should be able to see the message profile not found with an ID 124. Well, we have done the operations like insert, delete, and retrieve, but we didn't perform the operation that is update. What we have to do is we need to use the same save method to perform the update. What we will do, we will try to create one method called update profile phone number, which returns the updated profile. So update profile phone, which takes ID and the phone number. The ID is going to be the profile ID and the phone number is going to take the new phone number. We will call the get method, which is implemented in the service, that is going to take the ID and returns the profile. We will pass the ID to this, and if it is not null, then we should be able to update the phone number. But what I will do is I will call the set phone number and pass that to the profile DAO dot save method. Now what happens is the save method is going to check whether the profile object ID is already there in the table. If it is there, then it is going to update the phone number. If the ID is not present, then it is going to create a new record. Anyways, we are getting the profile based on ID, so the same ID will be there. For that reason, it is going to update, and we will return an updated object. In the else condition, we will return null. We will try to call this method, which is going to be from the main method. But in main method, we will simply comment the delete profile, and we will change this ID to 123 because 124 is deleted. Let us call the update profile phone number by passing the ID and the phone number. Let me pass some number like this, and then it is returning an updated profile, correct? So we will use profile updated profile equals, we will write if updated profile is not equal to null, it means profile updated successfully. We will print the phone number to see the updated phone number here. Phone number equals profile dot get phone number, and we will run this program so that I should see the ID which is having 123 to have an updated phone number. This is the updated phone number. We will try to pass a different number and see what happens. If I save it, it should be able to update the phone number to the same ID. So that's how we perform create, read, update, and delete operations using Spring Data JPA without actually writing the database logic.